November 1944. Somewhere above the cold, gray ceiling of the Pacific, a B-29 Superfortress pushes through thin, freezing air at 27,000 feet. The engines pulse in a steady rhythm, four giant Wright Duplex-Cyclones carving a path toward Japan. Inside the pressurized cabin, the temperature hovers just above freezing. Oxygen masks hiss quietly. The sky outside is clean and silent, but every man aboard knows it won't stay that way. During a brief moment of calm, the flight engineer unlatches a small metal container fixed beside the gunner's station. Frost spills out. Inside are 6 rock-solid blocks of vanilla ice cream, frozen perfectly by the sub-zero air at altitude. The crew takes slow, tired bites, the cold dessert cutting through exhaustion in a way nothing else can. Sugar for the brain, comfort for the nerves. A reminder of home at a time when home feels impossibly far away. Across the ocean, Luftwaffe intelligence officers study captured American pilot logs. One line stops them cold. Crew morale steady. Ice cream prepared on climb. Eaten during cruise. Ice cream at altitude. Mid-battle. Something no German pilot could imagine, and something that revealed far more than it seemed. By 1944, the air war had transformed into a test, not only of machines and tactics, but of the human beings trapped inside those machines for up to 15 hours at a time. The U.S. Army Air Forces, now operating across both the European and Pacific fronts, were flying missions at distances the Luftwaffe had never imagined during the early war Blitzkrieg years. American crews in B-24s and B-29s routinely spent entire days in the sky. They climbed to altitudes where the air was thin, the cold was lethal, and the monotony could be as dangerous as enemy fighters. Fatigue meant slower reaction times, low morale meant mistakes, and mistakes meant men didn't come home. The United States approached this problem differently. Their strategic philosophy emphasized not just aircraft performance, but crew sustainability. The idea that a bomber crew was a system, just like the engines, the radios, or the bomb racks. If any part of that system failed, the mission failed. So the Americans began doing something revolutionary. They engineered comfort into warfare, better food, hot meals at bases, warm clothing, heated gloves, improved oxygen masks, even small luxuries like coffee before takeoff or chocolate bars issued as morale rations. But the most unexpected innovation came from the very nature of high-altitude flight. The temperatures inside a bomber at 25,000 feet could drop below -30 degrees Celsius. For engineers at Wright Field, this meant something unusual. The environment outside the aircraft could act as a natural freezer. And where soldiers had a freezer, soldiers would find a way to make ice cream. The idea first emerged informally. Crews noticed that cans of milk placed near the gunner's blister froze during high-altitude runs. Mechanics joked about turning bomb bays into flying refrigerators. Food officers experimented with insulated containers. Within months, commanders realized this wasn't just a novelty. Crews performed better when morale stayed high. Something as simple, as American as ice cream had a measurable effect on alertness and stress recovery. Meanwhile, on the German side, the situation was the opposite. By late 1944, Luftwaffe pilots were fighting under catastrophic conditions. Aircraft fuel was limited. Training hours were cut to the bone. Pilots often flew 2 or 3 missions per day, surviving on cold rations eaten on the runway. Their cockpits were cramped, unheated, and punishingly loud. Frostbite and oxygen deprivation were constant threats. The Germans had pioneered many tools of modern aviation: pressurized cabins, advanced engines, jet aircraft, but they now lacked the industrial capacity to sustain comfort or logistics. Their war machine was cracking under pressure. So when American flight logs, POW testimonies, and captured mission kits revealed that U.S. crews were making and eating ice cream during combat missions, German officers were stunned. To them, it was almost unbelievable, something closer to a luxury cruise than a bombing operation. But the truth was deeper. Ice cream was only the surface. It symbolized the industrial, logistical, and psychological advantage the United States held, a nation able to send men into battle not only with cutting-edge aircraft, but with enough surplus energy to boost morale, regulate diet, and stabilize the human mind under extreme conditions. The Germans weren't frightened of the dessert. They were frightened of what it represented. And as the long-range bombing campaigns intensified, that American approach to human-centered warfare would become a decisive edge, one visible in small moments 27,000 feet above the Pacific. This leads directly into the second part of the background, where the story of ice cream connects to the story of American air power itself. The American air system was built for scale, and comfort became a weapon. To understand why something as simple as ice cream shocked German officers, one must understand the machinery of the U.S. war effort in 1944. It was not just aircraft in the sky. It was the entire industrial, nutritional, medical, and logistical network behind them. A network so large that even small luxuries could be mass-produced and delivered to combat crews without disrupting operations. By 1944, the United States operated more than 150 major air bases worldwide, supported by thousands of auxiliary fields, supply depots, weather stations, and maintenance commands. In the Pacific alone, the Mariana Islands, Saipan, Tinian, Guam had been transformed into floating factories of war. B-29 runways stretched over coral hills and former sugar fields. Fuel lines, refrigeration plants, oil storage tanks, repair hangars, and medical centers were built in months. That last component, refrigeration, was crucial. American planners knew that long-range air crews suffered from malnutrition, digestive stress, and appetite loss. Flying at extreme altitudes damaged the body. Crews were losing weight week after week. The solution was high-calorie food delivered in forms that were easy to preserve, easy to digest, and psychologically comforting. So bases built ice cream plants, actual factories, on islands thousands of miles from home. At the Navy's Pacific Fleet milk processing plant on Oahu, sailors churned out 10 gallons of ice cream per minute, shipping it in insulated containers across the vast ocean. Carriers had ice cream machines. Submarines installed them after repeated requests from crews. Even forward-deployed air bases on Iwo Jima built small coolers, powered by generators that ran alongside radar stations and searchlights. Ice cream became more than a food. It became a morale engine. Meanwhile, Germany was starving. The Luftwaffe of 1944 was a shadow of the sleek, confident force that had dominated skies over Europe in 1939 and 1940. Fuel shortages were crippling. Mechanics often siphoned gasoline from training aircraft to keep frontline fighters running. Ersatz food, synthetic bread, diluted soup, meager rations had become the norm. Air crews ate whatever they could find: black bread with margarine, cold sausage, watered-down coffee. Many pilots flew on empty stomachs. Others suffered chronic dehydration because water supplies froze inside aircraft. The idea of having time, space, or refrigeration to make ice cream during combat operations felt, to German officers, like an insult, as if the Americans must not even be fighting a real war. But they were fighting the hardest war in the sky. American bomber crews endured missions lasting from 9 to 15 hours. They flew over open ocean with no landmarks, through jet stream winds that shredded aircraft formations, and into the teeth of a well-prepared air defense system. Every second demanded alertness. Food, especially sugar, was brain fuel. Fatigue was the enemy. Morale was ammunition. So the U.S. military treated food not as a luxury, but as strategic nourishment. And high-altitude ice cream was not an accident, it was science. The frigid temperatures outside the bombers, especially the B-29, which flew higher than any previous production bomber, created natural freezing conditions. Engineers designed storage containers that could be mounted near hull sections exposed to airflow. Metal tins were filled with a mixture of canned milk and flavor concentrate, strapped in place during the climb out and frozen solid during the cruise to the target. By the time the crew crossed the Japanese coastline, the ice cream was ready. These same conditions made German officers uneasy. If Americans had the industrial ability, the aviation environment, and the logistical confidence to provide ice cream mid-mission, what other morale technologies were they using? What else did German pilots not have? This was not simply cultural shock. It was strategic fear, because the difference between a pilot flying hungry and a pilot flying energized could determine the outcome of an interception, a bombing run, or a survival chance during flak damage. And these small edges, multiplied across tens of thousands of sorties, gave the Americans a psychological and physiological advantage that Germany could not match. Now that the stage is fully set, we move from the world around the cruise to the perspectives that defined this unlikely moment. Human angle, the mind and body in combat. For a bomber crew at 25,000 feet, fatigue is immediate. Oxygen is thin. Fingers stiffen. Eyes strain against the glare of sun reflecting off the aluminum skin of the aircraft. Crew members eat little more than hardtack or chocolate bars during a 12-hour mission. If they eat at all, hunger and exhaustion multiply stress, reducing reaction time and focus. Ice cream was more than dessert. It was a shock to the nervous system. Sugar for the brain, fat for endurance. A scoop of frozen vanilla between flak bursts or while adjusting oxygen regulators could restore concentration and lift spirits. Pilots reported feeling alert yet calm, a rare mental state when flak bursts rained around them. For German pilots observing American aircrews, this was incomprehensible. POW reports repeatedly noted the Americans' ability to maintain composure over hours of bombing runs. Many Germans expected erratic behavior under fatigue. Instead, American airmen appeared sustained and alert, bolstered by high-calorie, morale-boosting rations. The human effect of ice cream was subtle but measurable. Crews made fewer mistakes, improved formation discipline, and reduced instances of mid-air accidents caused by exhaustion. Scientific angle. Calories, cold and high-altitude physiology. At altitudes exceeding 25,000 feet, a human body consumes vastly more energy just to maintain heat and oxygenation. Blood sugar drops rapidly. Cognitive performance deteriorates. The U.S. Army Air Forces recognized this and introduced high-calorie, high-sugar supplements, including chocolate, compressed candy, and ice cream. Ice cream offered unique benefits. It was palatable, dense in calories and cold enough to act as a temporary analgesic for minor pain caused by cold extremities. Freezing temperatures also slowed digestion minimally, reducing nausea from long missions. The dessert became a functional tool. It kept the brain alert, the body fueled, and morale elevated, all critical in long-range bombing operations where a single miscalculation could mean death for dozens. Logistics angle, engineering comfort into war. Feeding ice cream to air crews was no accident. It required planning, industrial capacity, and technical ingenuity. Bases in the Mariana Islands installed refrigeration units capable of producing tons of ice cream daily. Insulated containers were designed to withstand the vibration and temperature changes of flight. Generators ran around the clock. Supply chains ensured raw milk, sugar, and flavoring were shipped across the Pacific under constant threat from submarines and air attacks. This logistical feat symbolized the United States' ability to coordinate vast, complex systems to sustain both human and mechanical components. For German officers, the mere presence of ice cream at altitude was proof of an industrial and organizational dominance that was increasingly impossible to counter. Psychological warfare angle, shock and disbelief. Captured German documents reveal repeated astonishment. Reports mention crews receiving ice cream mid-mission and call it unbelievable and unthinkable. To the Axis, this was not just a trivial detail, but evidence of a military culture fundamentally different from their own, one that prioritized human endurance as a weapon. The psychological effect was profound. Luftwaffe officers, already facing losses in planes and pilots, now faced a cultural and technological contrast that eroded confidence. The idea that the enemy could maintain morale under extreme conditions highlighted the widening gap between Axis and Allied operational capability. Cultural angle, comfort as strategy. Americans approached war differently. Comfort was not indulgence, it was an operational necessity. While German and Japanese forces prioritized austerity, American planners understood that morale directly impacted mission success. Ice cream at 25,000 feet became a symbol of this philosophy. It demonstrated a belief that human beings could be treated as assets, not disposable parts. This cultural distinction stunned German officers. To them, soldiers went hungry, froze, and endured in silence. That the Americans could manufacture and deliver frozen desserts mid-mission was a reflection of industrial confidence and human-centric strategy. For Allied crews, a bite of vanilla or chocolate ice cream was a moment of normalcy in a world of chaos, a reminder of home, of care, and of purpose. This cultural lens transformed ice cream from a novelty into a statement. The U.S. was fighting smarter, not just harder. Operational angle, efficiency and performance in combat bomber missions demanded precision. Fatigued crews risked navigational errors, mid-air collisions, and poor bombing accuracy. Ice cream, simple as it seems, enhanced operational efficiency. Calories and sugar stabilized mental alertness. A brief pause for a frozen ration meant fewer mistakes during formation changes, bombing runs, or emergency maneuvers. Commanders observed that crews who received consistent high-calorie support performed better under duress. The ice cream programs were coordinated alongside oxygen, heating, and ration systems, an early example of integrated human factors engineering in warfare. German officers noted this integration in intelligence reports. It was not merely dessert, it was a calculated boost to air power effectiveness. Leadership angle, command decisions behind morale. Strategic commanders recognized that morale was as critical as bombs or guns. General Curtis LeMay, who oversaw B-29 operations in the Pacific, emphasized crew welfare in every planning session. Decisions to invest in refrigeration units, special containers, and high-calorie rations were deliberate leadership choices, not accidents. By prioritizing the human element, U.S. commanders created crews that were psychologically resilient and operationally capable. This contrasted sharply with German leadership. Luftwaffe officers often struggled to supply basic rations, leaving pilots fatigued and demoralized. When confronted with reports of ice cream served mid-flight, German command could only acknowledge that Allied officers had mastered both human and technological logistics in ways they could not replicate. Enemy angle, axis perception and fear, captured reports, intelligence intercepts, and POW testimonies reveal the German reaction: disbelief, mockery, and finally, quiet concern. Ice cream at altitude became shorthand for the broader gap between U.S. and Axis warfighting capacity. German pilots and officers understood that feeding crews mid-mission wasn't just luxury. It improved survival, alertness, and bombing accuracy. The realization that American industry could combine advanced aircraft, logistical innovation, and morale-boosting measures created a sense of strategic unease. Small details, like frozen vanilla during a bombing run, revealed systemic advantages that German officers could not counter without enormous industrial and logistical shifts, which by 1944 were no longer feasible. These 6 angles, human, scientific, logistics, psychological, cultural, and operational, together explain why a seemingly trivial act, feeding ice cream to airmen, had far-reaching effects across combat effectiveness, morale, and enemy perception. This builds directly toward the climactic moment when German officers' disbelief transforms into full recognition of American superiority. It was December 1944 over the skies of the Philippines. A B-29 formation, part of the 314th Bomb Wing, climbed steadily toward a Japanese industrial target on Luzon. Engines droned in synchronized rhythm. Gunner positions rattled as anti-aircraft fire began to erupt below. Inside, crews rotated tasks with precise efficiency. During a mid-cruise break, one gunner unlatched a small insulated container and retrieved a block of frozen vanilla ice cream. It was handed silently around the compartment. Between bites, the crew navigated flak bursts, adjusted oxygen masks, and corrected formation errors. Observers later noted that the crew's calmness in these critical minutes was remarkable, a direct result of this unconventional sustenance. Meanwhile, German intelligence had been monitoring Allied air operations through signals, intercepted radio chatter, and captured crew logs. Analysts noted repeated mentions of ice cream at altitude in debriefings. Initially dismissed as exaggeration, the details became impossible to ignore when POWs corroborated the reports. Americans literally ate ice cream during bombing missions, and this boosted alertness and morale. For Luftwaffe officers, this was astonishing. Reports expressed disbelief in margins of error normally reserved for aircraft performance statistics. A memo from a Berlin intelligence officer read, "The enemy is capable of delivering a dessert to their pilots while they are actively engaged in combat." This is a phenomenon we cannot understand. The shock was more than cultural, it was strategic. German officers had prided themselves on rigorous discipline and operational austerity. They could not imagine a system that combined extreme human comfort with tactical efficiency in real time. The notion that ice cream, a simple treat, could influence bombing accuracy and crew resilience struck fear into the evaluators. At the Mariana Islands, engineers ensured that the ice cream was preserved during flights. Insulated metal tins were strategically mounted near airflow pads to guarantee freezing. Generators hummed continuously, refrigeration units maintained consistent temperatures, and supply convoys ensured a constant stream of dairy, sugar, and flavoring. These efforts were meticulously coordinated with flight schedules, highlighting the scale of American organizational precision. The German realization was twofold. Humans could be optimized for war in a way previously thought impossible. Industrial might allowed for psychological advantages. Small interventions like frozen desserts could compound into measurable operational superiority. Reports captured officers' reactions. If their pilots eat desserts mid-flight, then their energy reserves and morale are beyond our comprehension. Our airmen endure, but they suffer. The Americans sustain. This was not merely astonishment. It was the recognition of a systemic edge that could not be replicated without a complete overhaul of supply, logistics, and cultural norms. By the end of the mission, German officers faced a critical turning point in their understanding of the Pacific Air War. Ice cream was a small detail, but it symbolized a broader reality. The United States was winning the war not only with bombs and planes, but with endurance, morale, and the innovative use of industrial power. The stage was now set for the decisive conclusion. German officers were forced to confront the full implications of American ingenuity. The next section will detail the culmination of this realization, how small comforts became a strategic edge. By early 1945, Allied air raids on Japanese territory intensified. B-29s launched from Saipan and Tinian, often escorted only by long-range fighters, faced heavy anti-aircraft fire and unpredictable weather. Missions stretched beyond 12 hours, sometimes 15. Every mechanical failure, every lapse in concentration could mean disaster, and yet, the U.S. had a secret edge that Germany and even Japan could not fathom. Their airmen were sustained in flight, often with something as simple as ice cream. Captured German intelligence reports revealed repeated astonishment. One memo described a scenario where a B-29 crew took nourishment in the form of frozen milk products during a critical bombing run. Another officer noted, "Their men remained cheerful and composed, consuming food while operating weapons. Such behavior is beyond comprehension." To the German High Command, this was not just a curiosity. It was evidence of a system where human endurance had become part of the weaponry. On the American side, the process was precise. Refrigerated supply lines ensured that ice cream arrived at forward bases. Flight engineers had developed insulated metal tins capable of keeping the dessert frozen throughout takeoff and climb. Once the aircraft reached operational altitude, the dessert remained solid yet palatable. Crews consumed it in short intervals, often during lulls in flak bursts or while adjusting formation positions. Pilots reported subtle but measurable improvements in focus and morale. Reduction in fatigue-induced errors, steadier hands-on controls, and calmer communication under pressure. The broader implication for German officers was staggering. Their own pilots often flew multiple missions without sufficient food or rest. Every meal was a logistical challenge. Every ice block had to be imported under wartime scarcity. In contrast, the Americans not only met basic nutritional needs, but enhanced human performance in combat situations through innovative delivery and clever use of technology. Ice cream had become a metaphor for the industrial and operational gap between the Axis and Allies. The psychological shock was compounded when U.S. engineers shared technical details in post-mission documents, details that would later be captured by German intelligence. These reports described insulated storage units designed to prevent melting during prolonged flight, calorie counts tailored to maintain alertness for 12-plus-hour missions, scheduling of consumption to optimize crew performance during critical phases. German officers recognized a harsh reality. Even a small ration, carefully managed, could have strategic consequences. Ice cream was a trivial-seeming indulgence, but in practice it maintained sharpness, endurance, and coordination for crews executing some of the most complex bombing operations in history. This turning point, when German pilots and officers fully realized the functional advantage of such a small comfort, symbolized a larger truth. It wasn't the dessert itself that was extraordinary. It was the planning, industrial capacity, and foresight behind its delivery. This innovation reflected the United States' ability to combine technology, logistics, and human physiology into a single operational system, something Axis forces could no longer compete with. The ice cream episodes were documented in multiple post-war interviews. Veterans recalled moments where a single scoop of frozen vanilla or chocolate could transform exhaustion into renewed focus. Commanders credited the small rations with reducing errors, smoothing intercrew tensions, and even saving lives during sudden emergencies. And in the records captured by the Germans, the disbelief of their officers became almost palpable, a recognition that Allied superiority extended far beyond aircraft, guns, or bombs. By the spring of 1945, German officers had internalized the lesson. The Allies were winning not only through destructive power, but through the optimization of the human element, sustained with ingenuity and care. Ice cream, once a symbol of novelty, had become emblematic of the broader technological and logistical supremacy of the United States. As the war drew toward its end, the consequence was clear. The Axis could not match the scale, sophistication, and foresight of the U.S. air campaign. What German officers initially dismissed as trivial, the simple act of feeding ice cream to airmen, was in reality a decisive factor in sustaining operational effectiveness. It highlighted a profound difference in approach, philosophy, and industrial capacity between the two sides. The moment the Germans understood this marked the turning point, not in a single battle, but in the broader contest of endurance, morale, and air supremacy. And from this point, the consequences, both immediate and long-term, would ripple across missions, theaters, and eventually history itself. By mid-1945, the full implications of the U.S. approach to aircrew welfare were clear. B-29 bombing campaigns had devastated Japanese industrial infrastructure, but they had done so with remarkably low attrition compared to projections. Crews sustained for long missions, supplied with high-calorie rations and morale boosters, including ice cream, remained alert, coordinated, and effective in extreme conditions. Luftwaffe intelligence continued to be confounded. Reports described American airmen consuming ice cream during bombing runs, remaining alert through long flights, and returning with minimal operational errors. German officers noted that such care and preparation directly enhanced bombing accuracy, formation cohesion, and survival rates. By contrast, Luftwaffe pilots, already stretched thin by shortages of fuel, aircraft, and training, struggled to match American consistency. The impact was visible on the ground. Damage assessments following raids revealed higher precision strikes than early war planners had anticipated. Factories, rail hubs, and military depots were destroyed systematically. While bombs did the damage, it was the sustained performance of crews, enabled by meticulous planning and unexpected comforts, that amplified operational effectiveness. Ice cream, a small indulgence, was part of a much larger system keeping human machinery at peak performance. At air bases across the Pacific, flight logs, maintenance reports, and crew testimonies reflected the tangible benefits of this approach. Pilots cited improved focus, less stress, and greater endurance during critical mission phases. Engineers noted that crews who were fed and mentally alert were less prone to mishandling aircraft systems, reducing accidents and mechanical strain. Even minor morale interventions, simple frozen treats, translated into measurable mission success. German officers, reviewing captured logs and POW interrogations, recognized the strategic consequences. One memo read, "Their men are fed during combat. Their planes are maintained. Their morale is high. We cannot replicate such conditions. This is no longer a contest of aircraft alone, but of endurance and organization." This acknowledgement marked a psychological turning point for Axis Command. It was a rare instance where enemy ingenuity and human-centered strategy were recognized as factors just as critical as guns, bombs, or airframes. Small comfort became a force multiplier. Ice cream was no longer dessert. It was symbolic of a broader industrial, logistical, and human advantage that the Germans could not counter in 1945. The realization highlighted a fundamental difference in approach. The Americans fought not just with bombs, but with sustained human efficiency, a concept foreign to the Luftwaffe's increasingly desperate air operations. As the summer of 1945 approached, the cumulative effect of these advantages, precision bombing, crew endurance, and morale maintenance, accelerated the collapse of Japanese industrial resistance. American crews, bolstered by rations, hot meals, and ice cream, were able to conduct repeated, long-range missions with fewer losses than projected. Every sortie reinforced the lesson German officers had reluctantly absorbed. Morale, human welfare, and logistical foresight were weapons in their own right. The contrast between U.S. and German air operations during these final months of the war underscores a broader truth. In modern warfare, victory is not solely determined by planes or guns, but by the integration of human performance, comfort, and endurance into operational planning. Ice cream was a small piece of this puzzle, but one whose effects were measured, undeniable, and remembered by those who witnessed it firsthand. The broader consequences of sustaining air crews with morale-boosting innovations extended far beyond the immediate battlefield. By mid-1945, U.S. air operations had achieved operational supremacy in the Pacific theater. The combination of advanced aircraft, meticulous maintenance, and human-focused logistics, including ice cream rations, allowed the United States to conduct sustained bombing campaigns with remarkably low attrition. German officers, reviewing post-mission intelligence, understood that this edge was systemic, not incidental. Captured documents detailed repeated sorties where B-29s returned with minimal damage despite heavy flak. Officers recognized that sustained alertness and morale contributed directly to survivability and mission success. Each scoop of ice cream represented a small but tangible reinforcement of operational efficiency, a micro-level advantage with macro-level effects. In Japan, the effect was indirect but profound. Factories, oil refineries, and transportation networks faced repeated strikes from well-coordinated bomber waves. Precision improved as crews remained alert and cohesive. Reports indicated that certain missions achieved targets with unprecedented accuracy, directly correlated with the crew's physiological and psychological readiness. Analysts later credited not just pilot skill, but effective crew welfare programs as a decisive factor. For German officers, this created a psychological burden. They were accustomed to measuring enemy capability in terms of aircraft, number, and firepower. But ice cream, a simple comfort, became a symbol of systemic superiority they could not replicate. The realization that human factors, carefully managed, could tip operational scales challenged entrenched notions of combat effectiveness. The effect on Axis planning was tangible. Luftwaffe strategists attempted to ration resources, enforce stricter schedules, and compensate with intensified training, but these measures could not replicate the American model. Supply shortages, fuel scarcity, and personnel fatigue limited their capacity to innovate. Meanwhile, the Allies could combine industrial might, logistical foresight, and human welfare to sustain prolonged operational campaigns. Even after the war, veterans recalled the impact of these measures. U.S. airmen consistently cited morale boosters, including ice cream, hot meals, and rest cycles, as critical to enduring the long hours over enemy territory. The Germans, reflecting on their wartime experiences, repeatedly acknowledged that such attention to crew welfare amplified American effectiveness in ways that weapons alone could not. The ice cream advantage became more than anecdote. It was a case study in human-centered logistics and morale as force multipliers. It demonstrated that attention to seemingly trivial details could yield outsized strategic effects. German officers' disbelief transformed into reluctant admiration, as they realized that operational efficiency depended not just on planes or bombs, but on the care, endurance, and readiness of those operating them. By the end of the Pacific Campaign, the cumulative impact of these practices contributed directly to Allied success. Bombing campaigns weakened Japanese industrial capacity, disrupted supply lines, and imposed psychological stress on both the military and civilian population. And at the heart of this operational system was a lesson German officers could never forget. Small comforts, meticulously planned, can become decisive. Weapons in total war. The stage is now set for reflection. The calm, measured closure that connects these human, logistical, and strategic threads into a philosophical understanding of innovation, endurance, and warfare. In the chaos of war, it is easy to imagine that only weapons and numbers determine victory. Yet the story of ice cream on B-29 missions reveals a deeper truth. War is fought as much with human endurance as with machines. A scoop of vanilla or chocolate, carefully preserved and delivered mid-flight, became more than a treat. It became a tool of operational supremacy, a bridge between morale, performance, and strategy. The astonishment of German officers was understandable. They had been trained to measure military efficiency in strict metrics: sorties flown, bombs dropped, and aircraft destroyed. They could not easily quantify the value of a calm mind, steady hands, or a crew that remained alert for hours under extreme stress. Yet these intangible advantages manifested in measurable ways: fewer mistakes, higher precision, reduced fatigue, and ultimately, more effective air campaigns. This episode also underscores the role of industrial capacity and foresight. Ice cream, at 25,000 feet, required refrigeration, insulated containers, precise timing, and dedicated supply chains. It was a demonstration that innovation in warfare is not limited to new weapons. It extends to the orchestration of human needs, logistics, and morale. In this sense, every dessert served mid-mission was both a small indulgence and a calculated strategic decision. Beyond its immediate tactical impact, the story carries a philosophical weight. It reminds us that human factors can determine the outcome of conflicts, and that seemingly trivial acts can ripple into historic consequences. Victory is rarely the product of brute force alone. It is the sum of careful planning, technological mastery, and attention to the human element. For German officers witnessing this innovation, disbelief turned into reluctant admiration. They saw a culture and military system that understood the soldier as a complex being, capable of extraordinary performance when nurtured with intelligence, care, and ingenuity. Ice cream became a symbol, not of indulgence, but of a broader philosophy where morale, sustenance, and innovation are integral weapons of war. In the end, this lesson endures beyond the Pacific skies of 1945. It is a reminder that in warfare, as in life, human endurance and ingenuity often outweigh sheer force, and that small innovations, like a simple scoop of ice cream, can become decisive instruments in shaping history. The story closes not with explosions or victory flags, but with a quiet understanding. The mind and spirit of the combatant, when sustained thoughtfully, can become a force as powerful as any bomb.